Happy Tuesday, everybody. Today we're speaking to M.I.C members Christy Lacruelle, she's the president, and we're speaking with Scott Schloegel. He is the VP of Government Relations. Today we're talking all things tariff. We're trying to help them get the message out about what's going on with tariffs, how it affects not only manufacturers, but all the way down to the dealer base and into your community. Have a listen to this episode about tariffs with Christy Lacruelle and Scott Schloegel.
This is a show for anybody that has something that they want to say. It's going to be full of people with a lot of energy, CEOs, OEMs, vendors.
Best practice ideas in this industry and of neighboring industries.
We're talking to people that are on the cutting edge of processes, management.
Serial entrepreneurs, authors. We really have a feast of all different types of senior level people.
A cornucopia, as it were.
A plethora, maybe. Grab a pen, grab a cup of coffee, and have a seat. Start writing. This is GarageCast.
GarageCast. Welcome to GarageCast. A lot of stuff going on out there, Dantzler. We're in the thick of 20 Club season in the fall. And also, a lot of stuff coming out of M.I.C. and DC and a lot of talk going on about tariffs. Yeah.
A lot of text flurries with our 20 clubs, that's for sure. And it goes anywhere from, hey, have you guys, do you know this one granular point of this thing that they're trying to pass? And the other guys in the room are like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I have no clue what you're talking about. So it's literally A to Z all over the board.
I had a dealer say, I'm too busy selling to worry about what's going on with tariffs right now. So
till he runs out of product. And then
yeah, right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of tariffs and to get a little color and some light shined on what's going on out there, we have podcast veteran Christy Lacruelle. She's been on. She is the president of the M.I.C. Christy, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me. And I love that being here one time has made me a veteran now.
There you go. You're a veteran. Yeah. And we also have Scott Schloegel, and he's M.I.C. Senior VP of Government Relations. That's a really big, scary, important title, Scott. So welcome to the show. And why don't you explain what that title is?
Yeah, pleased to be here with you guys. I appreciate the opportunity. It just means that I run government relations for both at Congress and all 50 states. And we've got a great government relations team here that makes me look good and makes me look smart. So I got to give all the credit to the rest of them here in our shop. So,
well, now that rumor has it you're also a power sport guy. Is that true?
I have been a short while. I started riding in 1975. Got my first Kawasaki dirt bike back then. Then went on to ATCs and ATVs, and been riding on road for many, many decades now. So yeah,
there you go.
And I love it.
Yeah, is that what brought you back to do government relations for the power sport industry in the M.I.C?
Absolutely. So I started out, I worked in the Michigan legislature for 3 years, then came out and worked for my hometown congressman for 18 years. After that, I got appointed by the president to the Export-Import Bank of the United States, where I served in a couple of different roles there, including chief of staff, and eventually left about a year into the first Trump administration as the acting president and chairman of the board at the Export-Import Bank of the United States. Yeah.
Wow.
Nice. Got all the credentials. Unlike us, Tony.
I told you guys.
Yeah, this guy is a power lunch scotch drinking. You can tell. Got
you should
fancy
see the
suits.
bottle. Hold that bottle up, Scott. Look at the bottle of whatever concoction he's
stout
drinking.
Beer. It's Saratoga.
Don't try to pass that off by holding it up to Christy. M.I.C. 1 year now. You've got your arms wrapped around this thing, as I'm told.
Oh, we're trying. It's a huge team effort, as Scott just mentioned. It's been probably the quickest year of my life, though. It has gone by so quick, and there has never been one dull week. But this team, works hard. It's amazing. The work behind the scenes, that's what we want people to understand. This is what we're here to do, is to serve the industry and, make it better for the future riders.
Awesome. Well, we thank you for doing it.
Hey, Scott, I want to get just a touch deeper into what your bio. So did you come out of school or whatever you were doing and get into the political environment right off the get-go? Did you find yourself there? I know that you not only were working for the Trump administration or during his administration, but also the Obama administration. Talk a little bit more about that before I give you the tariffs questions here.
Yeah. So when I first got I was graduating from college, and my hometown state representative at that time had a turnover on his staff. Asked me if I'd be interested in coming to work for him. He held the job open for like 2 months for me to come, finish up my graduation and come down to Lansing at that point and work for him. He then decided to run for state senate, lost. I worked for a different state rep for 2 years out of the Detroit area in Michigan. And then Bart, who was the congressman, he ran for Congress, won. I worked the first 4 years for him as his district director. He had 3 different chiefs of staff in the first 4 years, and every time he got rid of one of them, asked me if I'd be interested in coming out and being his new chief of staff. My wife finally said, he's probably not going to ask you a 4th time to come out here, so let's do it. I figured I'd be out here in D.C. for about a year or 2 before I got the boot, but did that for 14 years. Then President Obama appointed me to the Export-Import Bank. I worked 6 years under him, another 15 months under President Trump, and then had enough time in to retire. This gig came open, and I was like, man, that's a dream job for me, just because I love power sports. I love motorcycles. I've been riding pretty much all my life, as I mentioned. And I think the last time this job had opened up, Kathy Van Cleek was here before me. She was here for 41 or 42 years. So, not a job that came open very frequently. And I was really fortunate to land the gig here and have loved it.
Mm. Well, anybody that says ATC, it gets your ears up immediately, because that's when you know that you were in the thick of things, man. When you were riding ATCs, the death machines for sure. Hey, let's get right into this. So the tariff situation in the entire country has been quite volatile this year. Would you agree with me?
For sure. That's an understatement of the year, Tony.
You're right. So let's inform our listeners about the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the IEEPA. How long has it been around, and how is it in play at the moment relative to international trade? That is an absolute mouthful. So let's start slowly and work it in for our dealers out there.
Yeah. So let me go back even a step before that to the Trading with the Enemy Act, which was back in 1917. The Trading with the Enemy Act was put in place back when the U.S. was doing trade with Germany. Germany was getting into World War I. We had issues there. And so Congress passed the Trading with the Enemy Act that allowed the president to declare an emergency and stipulate how we could trade with anybody around the world when it came to acts of war and kind of restricting trade during that time. About 60 years later, in 1977, Congress was looking at it, and they said, so many of these presidents had declared emergencies since 1917, between then and 77, that there were still some of those emergencies that were 40 years old at the time, and said, this is kind of ridiculous. We need to put some different parameters around that. And so they passed the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA as we refer to it. And that allows the president to regulate interstate commerce, international commerce rather, after declaring a national emergency for whatever the reason is, and to respond to unusual and extraordinary threats to the United States. So that's kind of the definition of IEPA and why that was put in place. So not many presidents used IEPA over the years, and when President Trump did so, everybody was kind of like, what is this provision? And, we have to get smart on this suddenly and figure out what it is and why the president is using that particular structure. I'd be happy to tell you why he used that particular structure too, just because in his first term, so he had his first term, and then he was out for 4 years after he lost to Joe Biden. And during his first 4 years, he just felt like he had gotten stonewalled throughout the process, and things had kind of dragged on when he first tried to put in tariffs against China, and then he had some steel and aluminum tariffs that he had done. All of those were done either through the 232, what we call the Section 232 Tariff Act process, or the 301 tariff process. Those are very prescribed processes whereby there's input opportunity from Congress, there's oversight opportunity from Congress, there's the ability for consumers and manufacturers to give input, to request that they be excluded from it for some reason or another. And I think President Trump saw that as just a really slow process for him that wasn't going to let him affect change as quickly as he wanted to. And so when he got re-elected this year or last year, and he came into office this year, he just was like, okay, I need a process that's not going to be so long and prescribed and that just lets me do what I want to do. So that's why he's gone with this process. Because it allows him, in his mind, to just kind of do it very quickly and not have to go through various hoops and be accountable for a process by which those are put in place.
So, got it. And again, we make the statement all the time. We are not a political podcast. I'm just looking for clarity on this question. He took an act that was already in place and utilized that, because a lot of people think I just coming in and I'm just going to do whatever I want kind of thing. So that came from the IEPA Act that was long ago put in place.
Yeah, put in place in 77. And actually, right now the courts have said that there's a couple of courts that have ruled that the IEPA process, he's overstepped his bounds, right? That what he's done is illegal. And they're waiting on the Supreme Court to now come back and give a ruling on whether or not it's legal or illegal the way that he's done it. And if they come back and say that it's illegal, Trump has already looked at several other provisions that are out there in law that will not be anywhere near as kind of sweeping and flexible as what IEPA is. But he's already said that if they overrule IEPA, he's going to use one or two of these other processes to still try to do what he wants to do tariff-wise.
You said that it has been rarely used by other presidents since, I think you said, like the 60s ish or whatever it was. What else? When else it has been used akin to this, or different reasons, or what?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that, so I don't know what other times. I think it was used like during the Carter administration, when they saw that there was certain issues with regard to the emergency for, say, the oil embargo that we went through back in the 70s and early 80s. But I don't have a list of how it was used. Yeah.
Got it.
Christy, I'm going to come back to you. Okay, so now here's the catalyst that allowed a lot of these things to happen. I want to ask you about a timeline on reciprocating tariffs. And if you could, in the middle of that, tell us, people have heard derivative tariff and reciprocating tariff, and a little clarity on that. And then kind of what is the timeline that you've seen for reciprocating tariffs? And when did the M.I.C. jump into the fray?
I was just going to add real quick on Scott's previous part first, that there was an emergency declared with this process too, which was the fentanyl emergency, correct, Scott?
Yeah, yes.
Which is the piece that was missing. So why it's not used as regularly, most likely, is because you do have to declare an emergency with the process, and that was the emergency used in this particular situation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that was like 11 days after he took office, right? And I'm happy to speak to that, Christy, unless you want to. But
no, go for it. I just thought that was an important clarifying piece of how it came in.
Yeah, absolutely. So 11 days, I think it was, after he was in office, very first part of February, he declared that there was an emergency with regard to fentanyl drugs coming in across the border, and originally had done the declaration for Canada and Mexico and China. A lot of folks looked at that and said less than a fraction of 1% of fentanyl had been captured at the border in Canada. Not really an emergency up there. Mexico's kind of hard to do, hard to argue with, and same thing with China. And so that's when he first kind of stepped into the IEPA fray for tariffs and went with that process. And really, when you look at over the years, during Trump's first term, again, as I mentioned, they went through the 232 process, right? So that's a much more prescribed process versus this emergency process. And during that process, we had some really good wins. We were able to get exclusions for certain displacements of motorcycles, for example, under the China tariffs. We were able to get exclusions for helmets under one of the HTS codes that helmets are imported under, not another one. Various other parts, wiring harnesses, engine components, that kind of stuff. And so that prescribed process and kind of the sing for your supper, where I went into the folks over at Commerce and sat down and said, these are the things that we need to have excluded. Here's why we need to have them excluded. Safety gear, it makes no sense, right, to have high tariffs on safety gear if that safety gear is not manufactured here in the United States, for example. And so we had some good wins under the 232 process, but the IEPA process is very different, right, because there's not an exclusion opportunity other than if you're in really tight with the president and you get him to change his mind, as you've seen many, many times during this process. He could change his mind and say, no, I'm going to do something different for automobiles. I'm going to do something different for steel and aluminum. I'm going to do something different for medications that are coming into the country. And so that's the only way under IEPA to get those wins. But we had our fly-in earlier this year where we've had executives from across the country come into Washington, D.C., go up to the Hill, meet with their elected officials, talk to them about how these tariffs are going to impact us. And we did just that. And the day after our fly-in actually is when the president decided that he was going to suspend his first round of IEPA tariffs and give that like another 30 or 45 day pause so that they could have additional negotiations. And so, were we the ones who actually affected that change? Probably not, but are we one of the building blocks that kind of led to it? I like to think that we were, because members of Congress were hearing us out and they were saying, yep, we understand what you're going through there. So
interesting. Christy, let me circle back over. Well, I'm going to give Christy a new title. I'm going to call her president of the M.I.C. and assistant to the M.I.C. senior vice president of government relations. Because you had that fentanyl answer like that. I'll tell you, hey, let's go back to the and I appreciate that because Scott just laid out some of the wins that you at M.I.C. have had. Can you put some timelines to that for perspective for our listener, and then tell me a little bit about reciprocating versus derivative tariffs?
Yeah, as far as the timeline goes, the fly-in that Scott was talking about was in April. And so we were the first group to meet right after the announcement of those particular round of tariffs. And then it was the day after our fly-in that that it actually had the pause. And so that was one of the first big wins of the year on that side for us, is to get a little bit more breathing room with what can we actually do and how can the industry go and figure out a plan for this. Because the biggest issue with the tariffs right now is that they're just coming and there's no runway for anybody to figure out how to make a decision or how to, change their business from getting manufactured here versus there, or where they can get supplies from. There's just no time to do that. You immediately have to start paying the tariffs, and that causes harm right away to the industry. And that's what we're working on, is the communication we can have to tell administration, to tell members of Congress, this isn't the best way to do it. We're here for tariffs. We support what administration wants to do, but we need a little bit more runway to figure out how we can handle this so that it doesn't put power sports industry out of business.
So to clarify, power sports was involved, like, hey, we're going to get hit with this tax. You guys went out there, Scott, you went out there with your team and petitioned them as to why that didn't make sense on some of and then we got the relief from that. Is that the direct correlation, or was there relief from other things at the same time? It happened to be power sports got included in that.
All of it got paused for everybody at the time. So we were just one of the groups that went and started talking about how it impacts our particular industry. There were many other groups that do the same thing. And because of all of that outreach, it got paused at the time.
Nice.
So not just specific to us in that moment. And Scott, I'll let you talk about the reciprocal and derivative ones, because you're going to have a much better answer.
Yeah, well, and Sam, when you remember back to when he had his, what do you call it, Independence Day, or so the markets all went in the dumps, right? I mean, the markets went down. It was sustained for several days. That was a huge, huge portion, I think, of why he paused it, because the markets were like, whoa, time out. This is not good. And then once he paused it, you saw the markets come back up, and things were better for a while. And then since then, because he's had so many of these different extensions and so many different changes that he's made, which is easier to do under that IEPA process, again, versus a 232 or 301, right? Kind of the more derivative type process that you think about. This is how they go through and they do a structured way to have tariffs imposed. And but the other thing he's done is he's also eliminated the de minimis provision when it comes to tariffs. And so that was for anything, I think it was under $800 that was coming in from around the world. There wouldn't be tariffs on that. But now, you order a shirt that comes in from China, you're going to have the price of that shirt, and you may, depending on who the vendor is, have an additional tariff that's put on top of that, because previously, you're ordering a $45 or $50 shirt, whatever it might be, from China, that fell under the de minimis provision, and there wasn't an import tariff that was put onto that. Now, anything and everything that's coming in, you're seeing import tariffs on.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
interesting. Yeah, I do have a follow up to something that Christy was talking about. You both have been talking about before I ask you question number 4. And when you guys are up there trying to talk to people about this, right? What is the typical response back? That it's a wait and see, that it's a work in progress, that it's holy Moses, we're freaking out about this too. What's the tone and temperature out there?
In April, it was a lot of, well, we didn't get to make this choice. So when you're in the room with them, because it didn't come from a, vote that they all did, it was a lot of, we understand, we'll, take this feedback, but there was kind of they weren't trying to take responsibility for it. That was in all of the rooms that I was in during that week. That's what you were hearing a lot, but they wanted to help you. They wanted to help make sure that your story was told. And when you go and you meet with the different representatives, you go in the states where your company has a headquarters or some form of business in that state, so that they're more familiar with you and they understand the impact that your business would have if something were to become a negative impact in their community, in their state, their district, depending on who you're talking to. So in most cases, these people were really familiar with who our OEs were, who our aftermarket companies were that were with us in the room, and the impact it would have if something were to, massively change with those organizations. Scott, do you want to add to that?
Say, Tony, it was an all of the above, right? I mean, you got all of those reactions. It depends on who you met with. So in some instances, you were meeting with Democrats who saw it as a partisan issue that they could capitalize on, and they'd be like, yeah, we're opposed to it too. You would meet with Republicans who were real believers in what he was doing and would say, we think what he's doing is right. You would meet with Republicans who would say, it's not the way I would address it, but we're going to give him some time, let him try to implement his plan. Let's see how his plan works out, and then we can kind of revisit it. So really across the board, different reactions from elected officials.
Got it. Okay. So in addition to the initial tariffs put in place by that executive order, when and how did the steel and aluminum tariffs come into play?
Yeah, so in May, first week of May, they put out, they being the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry, Service Security, put out a Federal Register notice saying, hey, we're looking at increasing steel and aluminum tariffs. And this was through the 232 prescribed process, right? Not through IEPA. So the steel and aluminum tariffs, even though the president had said, I want a strong steel and aluminum industry here in the United States, and we need to do more to ensure that we have a strong industry here, this was going to be done through the normal 232 process. That came out, I think, around February 4th. We put out a notice to all of our members saying, hey, submit comments to us, what we call our FRANs, their Federal Register Action Notices. Sent that around to our membership, solicited input. We then submitted our letter in June to the Department of Commerce, arguing as to why we thought we should not be subject to the steel and aluminum tariffs, the fact that it would have a big impact on our industry. And then in August, they put out their final decision on it and basically made it immediately effective. And so those tariffs just went into effect immediately. And that was kind of the oh crap moment that our membership had of this just got real and it got bad real fast. So that was a timeline for that.
I was just going to say that meant like when he says immediate, it really is immediate. That means anything that was already on the water, anything at the border on the day that it went into effect, you're having to pay that tariff now. And this particular tariff is a very challenging one to have to prove the amount of steel or aluminum in the product. And that's probably the biggest challenge. Of course, there's the cost, which is unfortunate, but it's how you calculate it. That's really where a lot of this work has come, and people have had to take full teams at their company to go try to, backtrack and figure out what is the percent of steel or aluminum in those products.
Let's unpack that a little bit further. Ultimately, what I, Sam, the consumer, pay is a direct result of the dealership markup, and then it comes from the OEM and all this kind of stuff, right? So the OEM, dealer, and consumer all intertwined together here. But you just mentioned like the red tape for the OEM alone to figure out what percentage of the vehicle is steel. So walk us through kind of what does this mean for OEM, dealer, and consumer? If you can kind of cut through the haze and like what are the highlights of, I don't think people are thinking about these 3 things or 6 or whatever you think they are.
Would you like
Sure,
to do the example? Okay.
Yeah, I'll kick that off. I'll give you one example that I heard recently, right, from one of our aftermarket companies. They said, we needed to get a replacement key for a motorcycle that they were selling. That replacement key they get from Mexico. The key was typically $27.50. Because the Mexican supplier either could not determine where it was smelted and poured, the aluminum that was in there, couldn't determine where it was smelted and poured, or didn't provide that information. UPS, when UPS shipped that key to the aftermarket member in the United States, charged a 200% tariff for the steel and aluminum in it, as well as the regular other tariff that was associated with it. So the $27.50 key turns into an $80 replacement key for a motorcycle. And this is just a blade key, right? I'm not talking about a key fob. I'm talking about just a bladed key, where it's gone from $27.50 for the importer up to an $80 key now. Ridiculous. And then they're going to sell that to the customer, and the customer is going to say, why the hell am I paying, I'm probably going to mark it up something too for all the headaches that they had to do, and the multiple calls with us and with Customs and Border Protection to try to figure out why this thing was getting to the level that it was. And so that's just one example of how under this structure it is super difficult. And that's coming from, our OEs are dealing with second tier, third tier suppliers, and they're in foreign countries a lot of the time. And so those foreign countries, they may or may not know where that steel or aluminum was smelted and poured and came from. And if you can't document it, the default that we saw in this case, and I'm guessing it was probably UPS did the default of 200% tariff on that, because they didn't have any paperwork from the supplier in Mexico. So that's the kind of thing. And imagine that's just a key. So imagine what it's like for an entire vehicle and all of the components, all of the parts, the bolts, the washers, the engine frame, the, brake pads, brakes, you name it. So it's crazy.
So it's got an OEM taking the best guess at this point as to what percent of the vehicle is steel. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a regulatory nightmare for them, Sam. I mean, you think about this, and it's not just, it's going to have to be the best guess, number one. And then secondly, they're going to have to apply that same process for everything that they sell, so that they're not saying, well, for this vehicle, we think it's, we're going to calculate it this way. And for this vehicle, we're going to calculate it a different way. Or for this part, we're going to calculate it a third way. They have to be consistent, because when the Customs folks come back to them, if they can't prove exactly what they've done and show their work, then they're going to get hit with even bigger fines, because they're going to be, supposedly circumventing the tariffs.
Christy, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, so I was going to mention that what Scott was just talking about. So if you can't prove what percentage of the motorcycle, in the case of an OE, is steel, you have to pay the 50% tariff on the whole motorcycle. So that's the outcome. So you want to do this work and you want to get it right, because otherwise the default is we're just going to charge it across the whole motorcycle because you can't show us any paperwork proving otherwise.
Yeah, that's Crazy.
So look, Christy, let me come back. Well, I'm scared to go back to Christy again. She keeps deferring all my questions over to Scott. I feel like the dude at the bar back in college. I swear. So let's assume that goes fine. Let's assume we get through the red tape. We got the right number, whatever it happens to be. Can you give an example for people who are so unaware? Let's take a $10,000 dirt bike. Pick any dirt bike, any brand. It doesn't really make any difference. Can you walk us through what does this actually mean to the price the consumer is going to have to pay, or the price that somebody's going to have to eat along the way, right? The OEM's going to eat it, the dealer's going to eat it, or ultimately the consumer's going to eat it. Does that $10,000 machine become 10.5? Does it come 13 grand? Like, what is it? What's the number there?
Yeah, so it depends. So if you take a motorcycle as an example, a $10,000 motorcycle, and you say, 50% of it has steel, then you would be paying the tariff, a 50% tariff on 50% of the motorcycle. So the $5,000 would then have a $2,500 fee. So now we've got $2,500 tacked onto the $10,000, and then the remaining 50%. Say this was a European motorcycle, it has a 15% reciprocal tariff, and so then you take 15% on the remaining 50%, and you add that to the other fee. And so, help me with math.
I think that's a good point, because when you're sitting here just trying to do it on a table of if this, then, and with round numbers, it's very difficult. Then you got to have a manufacturer figure out, well, let's see what percentage of this it seems like it's a lot of work. So, I mean, what strategies are the OEMs using to manage this increase in costs regarding distribution in the U.S.?
Well, it's a lot of work, and certain countries have higher tariffs than others too. So, if you're getting something from India, it's a 50% tariff right now too. So you have the steel tariff, and then you have the 50% tariff from product coming in from India. This is why there's mass panic, because just depending where you're importing from, it can change the game significantly. And so to answer the question about what are the OEs doing, they're all using different tactics right now based on what their own personal situation is, because some that are manufacturing in the countries that have been hit the hardest, they're having to make completely different and more aggressive plans than others. I think, blanket across the board, they were hoping to be able to absorb this in the beginning, most of them, and some of them have still, put out communications saying they're going to try to do the best so that this doesn't hit the dealer or the end consumer. But if this stays, there's no chance that it cannot impact it. If we're successful in fighting this off, then yes, hopefully maybe they can for a time period, and then something changes. But if we can't, this means a significant increase in the price of all motorcycles. There's not one brand that makes a motorcycle that's completely in the U.S. with all parts from the U.S.
So you mentioned some of these OEMs have alluded to the fact that they're going to, I think you were very kind, I forget how you said it, like try to, or maybe possibly absorb a hit. I think two of them I know of at the time of this recording have come out and said, absolutely no tariffs are going to the OEMs. We're taking the whole hit. How can they do it? What's the burn rate? How long can the major manufacturer absorb the hit of all the taxes? Unless they're just betting on the come line that they think it's going to go away in 3 months or whatever, right? Is there something I'm not seeing here, Christy or Scott, whoever wants to take that one?
Go ahead, Scott.
It's that exact question, Sam, when we polled our members 2 weeks ago and sent it out to all the OEs and said, what's your timeline that you can exist in doing this? What's the maximum type of tariff number that you could live with? And it's all over the place. I mean, it really is all over the place. You've got some manufacturers that may have, other businesses that are really substantial that aren't being penalized as much, say, like the auto industry. You've got cultural differences from, Asian manufacturers versus European manufacturers versus U.S. manufacturers. And so different tolerances, risk tolerances that they've got culturally as they're doing business. And so it really is kind of all over the board on, some folks are still shipping stuff here, but putting it in containers and waiting to see what if the tariffs change in the next 30 or 60 days, and just kind of having those kind of carrying costs. There are others who are saying we're going to dial back and we're just going to not send things into the United States for a period of time. Or there's a couple of HTS codes, harmonized tariff system or schedule codes for motorcycles that aren't captured under the steel and aluminum tariffs. And maybe they'll focus just on those displacement bikes and sending those into the United States. And so it really is all over the place. But, what is the end result for them? And what's the end result for the consumers? The end result is you're going to have higher prices. You're going to have fewer choices. You're going to have delayed vehicle maintenance, you're going to have delayed purchases, you're going to have lower margins, you're going to have reduced sales volumes, closures and layoffs, domestic manufacturers, and foreign manufacturers alike. I mean, that's what's going to happen as this drags on. If it goes out, another 2, 3, 4 months, and then it gets even worse as it drags on even further.
And then, it's hard to believe. Go ahead, finish that, Scott.
I was just going to say the ripple effect to that is that you're going to have lost tax revenues, right, at the local level and at the federal level, because you're not going to be selling those units. And so you go across the rural parts of the country, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where I grew up, very rural area. And in a lot of those communities, your power sports dealership may be one of the biggest businesses in that community. And when they take a huge hit because they're not suddenly selling motorcycles, ATVs, and side-by-sides, that's a huge, huge impact. And most of our dealerships out there, they're really involved in their local communities too, right? They're involved with civic investment where they're supporting the local T-ball team or supporting the Cherry Festival or the whatever festival in that community. They've got all kinds of good that they're doing in the local community that they suddenly, and we've seen this from our dealers who responded, have said, we're going to have to rethink our charitable giving. We may not be able to support the local events that we've been able to support for decades before this because we're not going to be selling the vehicles. And, when you look at some of those charitable givings, I'll give you 2 examples. Because I had asked our members about this back during the flood in Texas that they had recently, and then Hurricane Helene in North Carolina. So for the Texas flooding, Polaris donated 4 Ranger Crew XP 1000 North Star Edition premium vehicles to the Texas Search and Rescue folks for navigating through their tough terrain, to try to do recovery and rescue missions following that. Honda donated a $1 million commitment to the American Red Cross disaster giving program so that the Red Cross could use that money there in Texas. For Hurricane Helene, we saw Kawasaki donated 10 Mule Pro DXT units to first responders. Polaris donated, the Polaris Foundation donated or sent 5 new Ranger XD 1500 vehicles. Honda donated $500,000 in disaster relief funds to the Red Cross to be used there in North Carolina. They allowed their Honda jets, which are manufactured in North Carolina, to be used to transport humanitarian relief to the hard-hit areas of the region. Yamaha donated, their outdoor power equipment division donated 500 portable generators to the American Red Cross to be used. Those are the kinds of things that they are going to have to look very closely at, whether they can still make those kind of commitments. And those are kind of big scale disaster commitments. But again, when you get into those small communities, as I said, where the power sports manufacturers or the power sports dealerships rather are one of the bigger businesses in those communities, they're supporting a lot of different charitable giving in their areas, and it'll make a big impact on those small rural areas.
Such a big event, and so unfortunate. I think the not knowing is the worst part about it. Like, what are we going to do? But all right, so we'll get to what the dealers can do in just a second. I'm kind of curious at the M.I.C. level. Are you guys coming out with both barrels? Are you Christy, you're jumping on a plane right now? Are you going to go live in Washington, D.C. for a while? And what can the M.I.C. do? What can third-party people like Garage Composites, what do we do to help?
Well, that's why we wanted to come on right now, because now is the time to actually take action and talk about the impact that it has. And unfortunately, not enough of the industry understands the impact. Like, just as you guys are hearing this and going, oh my gosh, like, this is terrible news, we don't believe most of the industry even is beginning to understand how critical of a moment this is for us to talk about what this impact could be and the impact it'll have on all of those communities. And so what we're doing at M.I.C. is we're currently getting approval on a letter that's going to go directly to the administration, to the president himself. And then from there, we're taking a derivative of that letter that we're making available to all of the industry members that they can go and download at our M.I.C. Action Center, and they can just tie their name to it and they can submit it directly to the members of Congress in their area. And our Action Center will actually ask you for your addresses and just send it out for you, which is really nice. You could also just copy it and then, tailor a little bit more to your specific situation and then send it in. So there's many options, but it's just, acting as one voice, speaking out as quickly as we can, trying to hit everyone we can. We've also talked about trying to get the industry to invite representatives to their actual locations, see their business, understand the impact, how many employees they have, what's going on, so they can truly understand the situation and also see, how great of businesses we do have representing our industry in that space.
Yeah. Christy touched on several of the steps of our 7-step plan that we've got, right? So the first step, as she mentioned, was this letter to the president and to Secretary Lutnick. Tomorrow, I'll actually be going in and meeting with William Kimmett, who is the Undersecretary for International Trade at Commerce, and Jeffrey Kessler, who is the Undersecretary for Industry and Security at Commerce. I'll be hand-delivering that letter to them tomorrow. The second point is to activate the association members, as Christy mentioned, where you can go and do this email campaign that we will have. Activate the dealer network, right? So we've reached out to dealers that are members of M.I.C. We're also sending out word through the NPDA conference, which is happening, I think, later this week or first part of next week.
Yep.
We are attempting to get members of Congress to write to the president about this, if we can get them to actually go on the record and talk about how taxing this is on our member companies and on consumers, and then to get company executives to go into the district offices. So if you are if you're in Atlanta, Georgia area, and you can get in and meet with those members of Congress in their local district office, and then invite them to come out to your facility, whether that's a manufacturing, a distribution, a dealership, whatever it is. Have them come out and see firsthand, this is what's happening in your district. This is the revenue that's being generated here. These are the jobs that are being supported here. And then 6th step is a PR campaign through social media, podcasts, that kind of stuff. And then the 7th would be, if necessary, do like an emergency fly-in, where we again fly everybody in here to DC, go up and hit the hill and start doing action up there. So that's the 7-step plan that we've got.
Super
Wow.
thorough. I like
Yep.
that. Is that 7-step written down anywhere where dealers can go check that out, where manufacturers can go look that up? Because you answered the last question, which is, dealers don't just have to sit on their hands. It can be grassroots at their community to show at the local level where the jobs are being affected and income can be affected. Where can they find this information?
Yeah, we have put that out through like our RIDE report and through some other communications. And really, when it comes to affecting change on this, data is key, right? I mean, without data points, we can all say, you can get up there and say, tariffs bad, they're hurting the industry, but we really need empirical data to say, this is what I sold last year during this month of September, and this is what I'm selling this year during the month of September. This is the price increase that I've had on these particular units. It is a perverse disincentive to have these tariffs. To have the tariffs is a perverse disincentive on things like maintenance of your vehicle. People aren't going to go in and do maintenance on their vehicles the way that they would otherwise if it's suddenly 30, 40% more expensive, 50%, 200% more expensive. You need a new key, but whatever the case is there. And so in safety gear, same thing, right? I dropped my helmet. I had I laid down the bike, whatever it is, buying new safety gear, all of that stuff, very little of that's made here in the United States. And so they're all going to have high tariffs on it. And, talking about how it puts people at risk because they're riding less safe vehicles that haven't been maintained properly. They're not doing the maintenance that they need. They're not buying the new safety gear that they need and should be wearing while they're out there. Those are the kinds of things that dealers can really help because they're on the ground. They're the ones who are the closest touch point to the consumers on those.
Got it. Christy, is there something you can send us that we can put on our website and on our social media as well?
Yes, of course. We'll make sure you have the 7-step plan, and then we'll have the letter for you guys available, and we'll have a link to the M.I.C. Action Center as well. That way everybody knows where to find all of the information. I did want to add one piece to what Scott was saying. Oftentimes we get questions, why can't everybody just shift and have everything produced in the U.S., manufactured, find the supplies? And those are not quick changes. Those require a lot of time, a lot of investment. Here in the U.S., there actually aren't even enough facilities if everybody in power sports shifted to try to have production here. And those are probably the most common question we get from the outside public when happening is, we'll just shift, and it's just, these are huge global companies we're talking about that are operating in power sports that can't make that shift so easy. And that's why that's not an option right now.
Yeah, it's simply it's not pragmatic to think. I mean, the fact is when globalization occurred years ago, it just made so many companies, it made so many countries interwoven and interdependent on everything that we do. So the concept of getting insular again and just doing everything here, while it seems like it's a great idea, it is not realistic in the world that we live in any longer. And that's a really big fact that I think a lot of people need to get their hands wrapped around.
Hey, I one more question for you here. What's the chance that he just walks away from this and changes his mind tomorrow, or the administration 3 months from now? What's the chance that we're seeing these tariffs past the end of the year? Gut feeling. Either one of you, for wherever your gut's going, I want to hear it.
Got a big gut, so but I will say that my inclination is that he may back down a little bit from some of these. But I don't think they go away altogether. And the reason being is I think he sees this as really kind of a cash cow for, paying for other help, either paying down the debt, paying for other spending that he wants to do and kind of implementing his agenda. And so I don't think that you'll see kind of walking away from it. But I do think that there's a possibility we may see some dialing back of some of them. Steel and aluminum tariffs, for example, do you have any idea how long, even if you waived all of the environmental review and siting requirements and all that kind of stuff to put in a new steel or aluminum factory, it's years to produce, to build one of those things and before they start actual production. And so he'll be out of office by that time. So there's going to have to be some tempering of the tariffs in some regard. And I quite honestly think that you're going to see, you'll probably see on Wednesday of this week where the Fed cuts interest rates, because the economy is slowing down, inflation is heating up, consumer confidence is on the decline. And so you'll see a little bit of a bump in the stock market on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday of this week when the Federal Reserve does their changes the rates. But I also think that by the time November and December roll around and people are doing their final Christmas shopping and things are really slowing down, and you get into January, February, and the numbers for for Q4 come in, I think that those numbers are not going to be very good, and they're going to have to revisit the tariffs and come up with something that's a little bit more rational than what they've got in place now.
Christy, one of the things he talks about, or that administration talks about all the time, is removing red tape for businesses. This clearly does not affect that goal. What's your gut tell you?
Because of that statement is why I also agree with Scott. I think some of these, like the steel and aluminum, they're just going to have to dial down. Like they're too difficult, not only for our industry to try to go figure out, but for the people there that are trying to determine the tariff too and actually charging us for it, all those people, they're just as confused. We talk to our OEs and it's like, what are you getting when you're at the border talking to all these custom agents? And it's like one custom agent says this thing, another custom agent says this other thing. It's just a mess. So whenever it's this messy, there's just got to be a change. So my gut tells me that there'll be some dialing back on those. Also because of Scott mentioning through the 232 process, we want to hear 232 and 301 nowadays. That's what we're actually hoping for if another tariff comes out, because at least we have a chance to fight it at the beginning and keep kind of going back and saying our story. And that's the most important part. So I think there'll be some relief there. The others, I think it's going to continue to just be negotiated, and probably we'll have what Scott and I refer to as a TV show lately is what it feels like we're in. Every week there's another, dramatic scene of something coming up that we're, on our toes for. And so that's how we feel like we'll probably be dancing through the rest of the year.
Wow. Crazy times, man. It's going to be very interesting to see what shakes out in Q4. Yeah.
You started this podcast, Christy, talking about it's been the fastest year of your life because you're tiptoeing and dancing your way through all these obstacles. Probably through Christmas. Maybe then you'll get a break on the backside of Christmas. Who knows?
Yeah, we hope so. I mean, we definitely hope it slows down. We know if the whole industry steps up and we talk as one voice, that's what's going to help move the needle. And so there's never been a more critical time for us to do that, where every single member of our industry counts. It's not just the OEs in this case, it's every single person that's going to be impacted down to the rider. And so we want to make sure that people are hearing the story and understanding how to help spread this message.
Yeah, and it'd be great if folks out there, whether you're a member, first of all, we'd love for you to join the M.I.C. If you're not a member of the M.I.C., go ahead and join so that you can get the action updates and the calls to action and the symposia that we do, the various symposiums and issue briefs and stuff like that. But sign up for our ride report as well. And then share your stories with us. Again, whether you're a member or not a member, we had a lot of folks who weren't members who shared information with us about what they think the impact of the tariffs are going to be. And it's everything from I'm going to have to shut down my business that I've had for 40 years to I'm going to dial things way back to it's a wait and see process. But they can email those impact stories to us at MICGR for M.I.C. Government Relations, MICGR at MIC.org. And we will take those and we mosaic that all together. And then that helps the narrative that feeds into the 3-page letter that we're delivering to the president and the secretary this week, as well as we're meeting with members of Congress to talk to them about specific, businesses in their districts.
Cool. MICGR at MIC.org.
Correct.
Okay. Good deal.
Scott Schloegel and Christy Lacruelle, thanks so much. This has been fantastic information, man. Let's hope that when we have you guys back on, it's to promote some better news of some results that we're hoping for. So for Scott Schloegel, Christy Lacruelle, and Sam Dancer, I'm Tony Gonzalez. This has been GarageCast. Have a fantastic Tuesday, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.